Hello and welcome to the Mindset Nebula, where we talk design, SAP, experience, and all other things happening in the tech world. And sometimes we just kind of talk about what we want to talk about. Today on the Mindset Nebula podcast, we have a really interesting topic. We're going to be talking about SAP Signavio. And with us today on the podcast are some probably podcast regulars now these days with us. So first off, we have Dinesh Chhabra. Welcome, Dinesh. How are you doing today?
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. So looking forward to this engaging discussion today. So thank you.
Yeah, excellent. We also have Parvathy Sankar.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be back again.
Yeah, it's nice to see you again. And we also have Robb Neuenschwander again.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here. Looking forward to the conversation. Thanks, John.
Yeah, absolutely. So really just to get right into this topic, I think, SAP Signavio has gotten a lot of traction in the marketplace in this past year. And we really wanted to focus a full episode on it because we're really interested in how this can help clients and customers really look at what's going on in their SAP systems, how these things come together, and how that transforms on the other side to what can you do with this information that you have. But maybe first off, I don't know, does anybody want to take a stab at what is this SAP Signavio thing in your mind?
So, John, let me take a few minutes here. What I gather is that SAP Signavio, when it comes to an enterprise, it is more focused around business process management. And when you talk about the underlying technologies like SAP BTP or SAP itself, that's the enabler for process improvement. And they both have to go hand in hand. And I think that becomes the conduit of how to bring in more optimization and resilience and compliance and things like that, and standardization together for the entire enterprise, working alongside the technology, overlaying that with the business process management tools such as SAP Signavio.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess in this view as well, I know before there was a Signavio, we'd heard a lot about Celonis. And so it does, I don't even know anymore. Does Celonis still exist? Is it still a separate company? Is it just that SAP bought Signavio and they're putting all their effort into that now? Or where does that partnership lie in this model?
I think Celonis still exists and as a separate company. I think the whole Signavio acquisition came about. SAP was using Signavio by the time they acquired Signavio, and they were already positioning Celonis to many of their customers. So it was perhaps a kind of head-to-head game, So, and then finally, Signavio was the chosen one, and Celonis still continues to exist. Interestingly, Celonis, I think, has expanded beyond SAP, was already expanding and has even gone beyond SAP. So maybe that kind of freed them to explore other avenues rather than just SAP. So if you think about ERP agnostic, it must be Celonis. And if you're thinking about SAP customers, then Signavio fits right well into the whole portfolio of SAP. And also, I'm sure with the acquisition, there's a lot of integration work going on. We will hear about it at some point of time. Integration at this moment is perhaps just talked about in the context of Solution Manager, and maybe S/4HANA will come at a later point of time. It's certainly a part of the rise with SAP, right? A main part of the rise with SAP. So,
yeah, correctly said. Sorry, go ahead, Rob.
No, I was just going to add on. I fully agree with that, and SAP's done a lot of effort in the last 9 to 12 months in marketing and making sure that people see the role of process intelligence as delivered through Signavio in their intelligent enterprise approach. And so when they talk about the intelligent enterprise, they talk about the core S4, they talk about the business capabilities, they talk about the BTP innovation and data management capabilities, and then they kind of rise over to the industry lines of business types of extensions, and then overriding the top of all that is this process intelligence. And so, they certainly have a vision about how all these components fit together. And the realization of that vision right now is Signavio. And so I agree with Paru. I think you're going to see more integration across all those different elements over time as they make it more tightly integrated. But I think it's a very coherent piece of their overall discussion of intelligent enterprise right now.
Yeah, and just to further the statement there, I think one of the main drivers was, as Paru said, that it was being used internally by SAP for transforming their own business processes, and they found the application or these capabilities that it had complementary to what SAP already had in their tool set. And that's the complementary part. And also the second part was, how do you branch from SAP processes into the non-SAP aspects of the business processes to give a more holistic perspective from end to end as an enterprise? And I think that change the viewpoint and say, this is a complementary and it works for us. It's for large enterprises and it works across SAP and non-SAP facets of the business process domains.
It's very interesting, Dinesh, that you mentioned that, because in my mind, the question is, as a part of RISE with SAP, there is always the intelligent enterprise and end-to-end processes that span traditional homegrown SAP systems as well as the acquired company cloud systems. And then the question is, knowing SAP and how long it takes with the integration and so on, where does Signavio start as an initial starting point? And then how does it branch off into tying up the complete intelligent processes? Because especially in these processes spanning, for just as an example, business networks, it will go across from S4HANA to Ariba, and maybe once we bring in the RISE with SAP business networks, at that point of time, logistics business networks. That is already 3 different solutions. And one strong point of Signavio is triggering workflows, and then all these workflows need to be triggered across the different systems. So I can imagine it's a long roadmap to get all these standard scenarios working. And perhaps this is also where customers will require the help of both SAP as well as other entities like partners to help them to figure out the way and to plug in the gaps, right? So.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe to answer a quick question here as well for folks, customers looking at Signavio to use, when would I use this tool? Like to me, this is very much like an explore / discovery type tool of, hey, this is how I see something that's going on that maybe I didn't know about. But do we see this as a tool that's used during a RISE engagement, or as a S4 upgrade tool, or are people out there running ECC? Does this have a ton of benefit of just installing there? What are thoughts?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, what I get from what the tool capabilities are and positioning of the tool set itself is that any enterprise who is looking to transform themselves, they need to fully understand what are they transforming and their business processes. To have a very detailed understanding of what they do as an organization is very important. And also this employing this technology, at any time is beneficial, but more so it is governed or impacted by the external factors, like talk about pandemic, talk about compliance, and monitoring and compliance regulations that come into effect that the companies or enterprise need to respond to. And unless you understand your business processes in detail and find out either the good parts or the inefficient parts, you are not in a position to actually adjust your processes to the outside world. And I think those are the imperatives. It is the pandemic. It is the digitalization. It is the how can I put more monitoring and compliance into effect, and agility that I can bring to the business. I think those are the drivers that can bring in, and they still follow the SAP Activate phases. But I think what my understanding tells me is that having a proper value proposition defined upfront, they call the phase 0 of SAP Activate, which is the plan and define and then start and explore, define and design. Emphasize on that first, because there could be multiple iterations how you go about implementing the several components that are part of the SAP Signavio toolset is, and what makes most sense is very unique to your situation. So spend the time necessary to derive or determine the value proposition, what you want to actually attain, and do that iteration cycle early on to actually, start implementing the other pieces of the components that it has to offer.
So not really a system requirement, that you have to be on S4 or anything like that, but more of a phase that you or your company is in.
Yep.
I think the way I like to think about it is it's a real fact-based kind of exploration. So look into really what is the data telling you, what is the numbers telling you, and identify where are the problem areas based on those factual situations, and then take actions based on the factual situations. What I would miss over there is the human feelings and the human emotions, right? So when I think in terms of what we do in design thinking, there is the human element, the feelings, the emotions aspect of it that overlays on that. And what Signavio would add to our design thinking is bring in the factual aspects of how are the customers' processes running, how are the customer systems running, and then merge the two together to bring a huge value to our customers. This is how I would think about the usage of Signavio, a fact-based addition on top of what are the humans feeling, and then take that further to validate or to contradict. Is this really where we need to focus on, and help to prioritize?
Yeah, I think that's really good, Puru. The one thing that occurs to me is there's two use cases, and Dinesh touched on both of them a bit that stand out first in my mind. One is kind of in the vein of continuous improvement and understanding how your existing business processes are working. Like you're in the system, you're using it today, and the outputs of Signavio's analysis can be good signals to where you might be having problems.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can dig into those and look at them from a human-centered perspective, as Puru talked about, and look at the different angles. But having the data to pinpoint some of those areas where the processes seem to be working well or in alignment with standards, and where things might be off the rails a bit, is really useful, because it helps you identify where to inspect. And it's important to continuously inspect and adapt so you can improve your existing processes. The other piece is then, what are things that you're not doing today that would benefit your organization? And so that's more of the exploratory phase that Dinesh was talking about. And there, baselining, the right ways that processes could be stood up and could be implemented in your organization that's kind of tried and true in the market. Is an additional value point, and that's more in kind of extending your capabilities. So one is continuous improvement, and one is your expansion. That's kind of the two use cases I label on it.
Yeah. And the other neat part of this exercise is, while you're doing it, is that you have the ability to actually simulate. Once you find the inefficiencies or the processes that are deficient or manual or redundant, you can simulate a path of higher value. And then you can see the results, how this impacts your overall end-to-end process and where the efficiencies can be gained. And then you can fine-tune that process through this iteration, through the simulation process.
Mm-hmm.
Something came to mind with these points too, is that, when we traditionally start out with a customer, we're kind of in this explore and discover phase. And I can't think of a better tool right now other than Signavio that helps describe a business case. Right. Once you have these facts, once you have these figures, we have probably 1 to many, 10 different business cases of things that a customer can go after. And so once those things are identified, coming back to Puri, your thoughts there is, hey, we have these 10 different business use cases with validated metrics that we can go after. Now, let's start to do user research. Let's start to do user interviews. Let's see how much pain is coming from this. Let's research some service desk tickets. How many issues are actually happening in this area? And using both of those sides together really drive what you can go through a design thinking engagement for, what comes out of that process, and can you tie, like the biggest thing at the end of the day for me is, can you tie what you saw in Signavio to business results at the end of the day from what you implemented, whether that's via all the different channels that Signavio can help with, like process automation or other automated tools, there is that huge human component to it as well that we're not really seeing in the tool.
Right. And I think, John, it also provides at least a journey modeler, right? It provides a kind of infrastructure, and it really gives a structure to building out what your solutions could look like, to your point, Dinesh, that you mentioned as well. Think in terms of what is the persona. If you think we are already doing personas, but walking through what does that persona mean, bringing in that persona, what do the touch points bring in? We bring in the sentiments from our workshop and then add the data on top of that and then link it completely. So how does that look like as an end result before we jump into the final implementation of it? That will add to the business case and then help us to refine the business case further as well. When we think about which solution do we actually want to put in place. So
yeah, the key word there is experience. Yeah.
Yes.
How do you take the operational data and see side by side with the experience data that you're collecting, and see how those touch points and those satisfaction levels and whatever that experience data tells you, how to marry the two, and that's where you see the clear picture where to make a dent.
Yeah. I think the one thing that I was looking into it was also the process governance aspect. I'm wondering how that ties up with the GRC, right? So far I haven't seen anything. I don't know whether any of you have seen, but I haven't seen anything that talks about process governance tying up to GRC or anything of that sort. So there is the risk and control management. I hope that there is a tie up to GRC coming as well, because that will help to kind of round up. I don't know whether it's a pure technical part, and that's where I need to dig in further, because they do talk about integration to solution manager, but not to GRC. So that's something I would love to see further. So
yeah, and those are important evolutions of the product, because otherwise your customers are confused that where should I be doing these things within my stack? Like if I've got some of those types of capabilities that might be present in Signavio, but also present in other components of my operation and my solution set. Where do I spend my time? It's without guidance or rationalization of that, it can be particularly confusing.
Right. Yeah.
I want to make sure I didn't miss an opportunity to throw in a throwback joke from Dinesh's comments on experience data and operational data. The Bill McDermott connector X's and O's.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're allowed to still say that anymore.
Oh, I think you are. It's a part of the whole business transformation suite, if I understood right.
Perfect.
Yeah, I did see that experience aspect coming into this, but I haven't seen an example, but I did see it in some white papers and so on. So
yeah, it is actually embedded within what they call the journey modeler. That's where they try to bring the operational data for improvement, and then read it or study it with the experience data that you're bringing in from external sources, and how to then map it out in a more graphical representation to see where things can make a high value impact if you were to change something.
Yeah. I think it's really good that they've continued with that too. Just because there may not have been a very overly direct Qualtrics connection back in the day to all these things, but the components of it are exactly right. We need operational business data statistics to sell these things to management. We need to have a quantifiable business case that has value, that has ROI, that has percentage increases that we can prove. But there's a whole other side of it, of how, us as mindset, our mission statement, it says it right there, that we make people's lives better at work, and that you cannot quantify in a business dollar value. You can quantify it in a pain point or a user research point, or everything that people see when they come out of a project and how much it's helped them in their day-to-day lives. And I think that gets lost a lot.
I can ultimately tie that, employee experience to engagement and retention, right? And that's where you start to have real vast amounts of dollars involved, because recruiting, hiring, training, onboarding talent is expensive. and it's disruptive, and being able to have more engaged and longer tenured employees because you're providing for their experience. It definitely has a business value that you can measure with kind of hard dollars. But right, having the signals to how this improves the user experience and showing the kind of the correlation between the attention that you're giving to these process indicators and improved process tied to the experience. That's if you can make that connection there, you can show business value.
Correct. That's correct, Rob. And I think you can take the same sentiment and apply that to another constituent of as a customer. Is the customer happy? Is a returning customer? Is it customer raving about your products, in your social profiles? And those things, don't have like a direct correlation of my next sale is going to come from that, but have an overarching value impact as to how this company is actually perceived outside. Yeah.
I think one of the things is also from a change management perspective, right? I mean, how often do we have solutions that are built up with just the stakeholders working it out, and then nobody in the organization actually adopts it? So just to understand really what are the parameters to apply, what can convince the users regarding why this change is applicable for them, even getting their sentiments back into how that change looks like. I think that is typically an underestimated aspect of any kind of project, and this also helps to bring that again, coming back to fact-based let's say foundation or motivation that will then help the adoption better. So
now that we know that it's a good tool to use, right? it's a good place to find things. How do we do it? How do we get into Signavio? Where do we start?
So my observations, John, in this area has been that, you can't, as we said, there are major 6 components, 4 were part of the SAP Signavio tool. When they acquired it, they added 2 components to that, which is the process insights and the automation part that was added by SAP to make it a full holistic, suite of business process management. To me, sounds like, you can't do everything. You can't do all 6 components at the same time, but you can start from somewhere. And what my knowledge tells me that starting from the process insights area is your best bet, because that can give you some empirical data, as well as some other key information as to where things can be transformed, because you can do simulations, you can do other things, but also you can also factor in how can I better standardize processes towards the goal of process excellence, and then also find avenues to bind the process such a way that more and more automation can be employed there as well. So the tools that we always talk about, IRPA and the BDP suite of integration and data analytics, data is residing in 100 places. How do I bring it and unify the data in one single place? So I think those are the avenues that you uncover, and you try to solve those one at a time. You can always start small. We have been a proponent of with a POC, with a small. So take an element of process insight. It is quite, it's not very difficult to getting outcomes or outputs in weeks and months. It is a matter of days, and you can start your journey right there and complement that with some, journey modeler to add the experience data to that. And that's where you can start seeing the picture of where my value is going to be, if I were to change something in the status quo.
I think if we were to think, Dinesh, I'm completely in agreement with you. If we were to think in terms of our 5 phases, explore, discover, design, starting with those 3 phases, and also that's also the app house phases, right? So typically we start with the explore to identify which are the problem areas, or most often customers come to us with problem areas and say, this is where we need to make some change. Now the question is the problem area they are seeing really the right problem area? That is really where we can apply, we bring in the industry best practices, we bring in our understanding of what are the trends in the industry, and then we see what is the match there and apply the Signavio process insights and see, okay, this is where we see the match, this is where you think you're having a problem. Actually, the data shows you perhaps are not having a problem over there. And but the outliers are actually what you should be looking for. Or maybe you you are absolutely bang on. That is exactly where you have the problem. So we help, Process Insights really helps them to model it. Then we go through our discovery phase. We work through the design. We put the users together, identify what are actually the challenges they're facing, and then do the journey modeler to see where exactly is, how exactly does the solution look like? Is that the solution that they can relate to? Does the data speak the same? So bringing in the two aspects is very important, not just a machine aspect, but or a data-driven aspect, but bring the users together, bring the people together, build up that, as you said, build up that change business case for that. And then subsequently, before you jump in and implement everything, make sure you have all that set in place and in stone. So that's the starting point, Process Insights. The same for me. Rob.
No, I fully agree. I would only round out the piece that you didn't touch on is once you go through that process of discovery and exploration, and then implementation. Then you've got the the process automation and the governance that's more of the kind of the execution phase on the backside of that, the tools that they bring in. But yeah, I think you two covered it very well. I would look at it the same way.
The other component. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
The one thing that I kept challenging myself, even while I was thinking Process Insights, is we talk a lot about the hype word, artificial intelligence, right? So from that perspective, what about the automation aspect? What about the deep learning aspect? So maybe if you're a client that is jumping into having the latest and the greatest technology and in reducing all the manual work, perhaps that is one area where you can really look into how can we automate processes further and so on. So, but you still need the Process Insights. So
do you feel a natural tie in there from what and why SAP bought Signavio into getting all the way over into that process automation step where all of these things are going to be hosted on BTP. BTP is a huge push for SAP, of course, to get people into more of the innovative services and things like that, and the quote unquote magical words of AI, ML, IoT, magical automation that happens in a black box somewhere, right? But to get there, that's exactly the point. We need to know why, when, and where we should focus those things, and that's a little bit of why I think that this tool almost deserves a better description from a business perspective versus, hey, this is a tool that IT can run to see where something's wrong. Yes, it is that, but a business person won't know that Signavio is there for them to help with any pain points that they have, unless an IT team is already very well versed in it and knows kind of exactly where it can focus. So I don't know, from doing some research for this episode on Signavio itself, they're very much into doing the data mining all the way to the automation piece, and I think they're missing a little bit of the business sell here.
Actually, absolutely right. Because in my mind, I'm not able to think of this as an IT tool, to be very honest, right? So maybe because the Process Insights is kind of blocking my head, but by the time we come all the way to the process automation, interestingly, AI, ML, all those play a role, but there is also the old world word workflow. And that I found very interesting, because this is one of the most underestimated, I think, part of any project that we can see. Everyone just kind of does workflow at the end as a kind of afterthought, whereas that is the one that connects everybody together and helps really in taking the right decisions by the right person. And maybe this is what brings it to that level, right? So Dinesh, you were going to say something. I saw you coming.
Yeah, Miss, I think there were two parts to that. On the first statement, I was trying to add the flavor of benchmarking and moving towards the best practices, because that's what your Process Insights can tell you, where you are deviating, or there is an opportunity for one to move better to the the best practices, and that could be best practices right out of the SAP box as well. But then to match up against the industry benchmarks as well, and that can tell you how much forward you have to move to get closer to those benchmarks. And the second part was, the tool itself is called more of a business centric, and that's why they say it can be integrated to Soulman. with the connectors and adapters that are already available, because you can then seamlessly bring the process flows and from the repository from Solman and bring it to the outside world of IT, which is business. And then you work in conjunction with the business and IT together. I mean, that's how they're promoting it from SAP standpoint, is that this should treat it as a business system. And then the solution manager, which houses your process, the hierarchy and the flows and everything else, all those artifacts can easily be extracted out, along with the data from S4 or ECC, and then together with the data and you can apply that data to the processes now. And now you're able to find out, if I'm pushing all this data through this business process step, where are the hiccups? Where are the bottlenecks? And what can I do to improve those or eliminate those bottlenecks? And that's where I see it is together, working together can reap the benefits, not as individual as an IT or just a business. They have to work together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Do you see, so as everybody's here kind of working with their clients and customers, have you seen a lot of uptake yet in Signavio customers? Have you seen it run in a customer instance? Any foresight there?
I was just thinking about that, John. I have not yet. And it might be that it's in some of the enterprises, but maybe being used in a more of a planning function that I'm not as close to with the people that I've been working with. That being said, the marketing, most of the companies that I'm working with are established SAP organizations. They've got a sizable footprint. They're transitioning or considering S4. Some of them are on S4, but none of them have really chosen RISE as the path that they're going at. And a lot of the marketing and the association of Signavio with the other enterprise solutions of SAPs that I've seen have been tied to RISE and kind of that S4 transformation piece. And none of the customers I'm currently working with are right within that kind of that wheelhouse. It feels like that's too limited, right? I think it's got broader applicability, but I haven't seen it marketed or at least discussed within my customer base in that broader applicability just yet.
Yep.
I would concur with that. Yeah. I would concur with that, Rob and Farooq. Yeah. And I think inclination for customers to get that is with the SAP RISE. If you get that, the whole gamut, then you are a better chance to employ that as a technology set or as a tool set. But as Rob and Farooq said, that the application is much wider. It doesn't have to be alongside that. It can be for transforming your business for the impending circumstances that you're dealing with, your organization is dealing with, to become a better orchestrated enterprise. So.
Right. I think there's also the whole aspect of like BTP, how many customers are able to really grasp what is Signavio about and how can it bring a big difference to them. BTP is a little further into the journey than Signavio is, right? So I think that is one of the challenges. Dinesh, what you just said made me think of something. When we think of, if we were to think of Signavio as a business users, imagine the integration with AppGyver what would happen. The business users can look into the insights from Signavio and then create low-code applications with AppGyver. So that's two acquisitions coming together. I think maybe I should talk to SAP about what I can do for them, right? So
yeah, there is a correlation there. Yeah.
Sounds like there's a roadmap. We've already put it out there.
Exactly. I need to put some kind of copyright or trademark over there. So yeah,
I kind of had the same feel, Rob, about the marketing aspect of it, is that it's kind of composed into this RISE offering where people are only looking at this as an upgrade or a transformation tool from ECC to S4, and to that point, yeah, I think it is larger than that. It can be used outside of those contexts and have a ton of value.
Yeah,
it is larger than. Sorry, go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to say, Prue mentioned this earlier too, that BTP, if you take that as a comparison point, right? I think it started out in a similar, got lumped into a broader set of other offerings in the integrated, the Intelligent Enterprise suite. But it's started to kind of emerge as a separate concern now, right? And we're seeing uptick in customers that are looking at BTP and innovation and use of that outside of the scope of their transformation to S4. And maybe that's where Signavio needs to emerge. And maybe, you know, several months down the road, we'll be entertaining customers who want us to work with them on Signavio proof of concepts and implementation and drive that similar to how we're doing that with BTP with several customers.
We could ideate on what the name change is going to be. You know, since there's going to be at least 3 name changes before it becomes popular.
Right now it's BTS, you know, like the Korean band BTS. It could stay popular. So, but I think to that point itself, I mean, the fact that Celonis was very popular even before this acquisition happened and before RISE came itself is an indication that there is a need for such a tool. And maybe RISE is just a kind of launch pad while SAP gets all the integration act and everything together, because otherwise there's a lot of expectation from the clients regarding what all can the tool go. So maybe it's a kind of, let's protect this a little bit before we kind of launch it into an independent entity, by which time you're ready with all the different interfaces and all the different links, for example, the solution manager, to launch it as a different independent tool for any of the SAP software to run on, right? So, which may take another decade, perhaps, thinking about all the other.
Yes, especially on the process insights, when they added that, you know, as part of the portfolio, you know, it still is SAP centric. So it has to, you know, from other parts of the components, yeah, it is non-SAP, but just for that purpose, you know, it is only centric to SAP now. So it has to move beyond non-SAP features as well to do the process insights. Yeah.
And in fact, SAP was already working on process insights even before Signavio, and also had a BPM before Signavio. So this is perhaps just bringing a state of art, all those tools together, right? So, and to bring the two together, I think will need some work. And it's just, what, 1 year now? 1 year, 4 months, maybe. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You said something interesting before too, Paru, around, you know, we're usually looking at a customer from a very specific pain point perspective and being able to use this to kind of validate those thoughts. And, you know, it's one thing that even if we were to run it after a pain point there, we could be able to, and a customer can do this on their own as well, but really showcase, hey, is this what you should be focused on? Right? There could be a glaring hole in supply chain that people haven't seen that has a huge business case and a huge ROI perspective that, you know, whether it's a best bang for your buck approach, whether it's a top-down approach, you know, it's a lot of different strategies in how people tackle different things within SAP. This is one of those points where you can really showcase, are you working on the right thing at the right time?
Mm-hmm.
And John, how does this tie into the accelerators and the value of the accelerators?
All we do. No, it's a good point, because, you know, so my team's developing a bunch of different accelerators out here for different pain points and different process areas that we see over and over again. They're super common use cases. That's why we want to have a huge catalog of accelerator type applications. And so I see this being used and has been used as something where we can identify to a business, here's all the places where you have some gaps or you have some holes. And we have an accelerator now that's, we're going through a fun naming process, but some people call it the S4 App Genie, some call it the S4 App Finder. I think I'm just going to rename it to something like Merlin by Mindset, because it's some wizardry, some who knows. But the tool actually goes out and maps, you know, your SAP usage to standard content from SAP. So usually standard Fiori applications is what we're looking at. And if we see glaring holes in certain supply chain areas, we can target that process area within our accelerator to showcase, look at all the standard content out here from SAP that you're not using. Mm-hmm. What that also does as well, and what's in our backlog that is a little sneak preview here, is we want to be able to tie that to our accelerator catalog as well. So if we can go into our tool and say, these are all the standard pieces of content from SAP that you can employ for this, and or for your pain point for this area that Signavio sees, we can also see an output of these accelerators from Mindset also fit this business need, fit this use case, and are very common scenarios that we work within all the time. So I can see us using this, just internally within our team to be able to run different scenarios on where people see holes in areas and what content is available out there in the marketplace to them.
Yeah. And I think that ties very well with the industry best practices as well, right? What we discussed towards the end of last year, John, tie the best practices and the accelerator together and then see which are the process insights that get plugged with that. I think that would add a strong value to even customers understanding really what is the business case and where exactly they need to invest in. So
yeah, those common pain points are different for each industry,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
You can't go to a utilities customer and say you have a sales order problem, right? And you can't go to a manufacturer and say your field service workers are having problems. So it's, there's a lot of common pain points that are very, very industry tied.
Right. The same pain points, very different use cases in each industry, right? So yeah.
No, it's a good call out.
Yeah. No, I think overall, I think it really is going to be exciting, provided SAP is going able to showcase the value to the customers. I think that is the biggest challenge that I see that is happening at the moment. So, and for us,
demonstrated as a standalone value driver, right? Not as part of a bundle. I think that still is another piece that maybe would be a critical part to seeing it used more frequently.
Right.
Is this used kind of as a sales tool right now to get people into more of an S4 Rise program? Or are they using it as a benefit point to that? Or do we know?
I've definitely seen it mentioned as a benefit of you get the licensing for this and the capabilities that it provides when you go with that bundle. I've definitely seen that advertised very specifically.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the question is, are the customers seeing that as a benefit, right? So enough. So
yeah, I was just curious if it's part of the the overall long-term strategy of hey, SAP, let's get people to the cloud, and so they're bundling it together in anything to move people towards that service offering that they want.
And that would make sense, right? Because that is such a critical piece of their strategy right now.
Yeah.
The question is at what point do they unleash it on and market it more directly towards the rest of the SAP population and start to promote other value drivers,
which is a huge amount.
For sure.
In fact, a little bit of history. This was also one of the value drivers for SuccessFactors in 2011, 2012, that there were all these standard KPIs and so on, using which you could see how your SuccessFactors processes were performing. And you could benchmark against the industry benchmarks and actually decide where exactly you fall and take actions on the processes. So this is from a messaging perspective, it sounds very similar from 2012, but perhaps with very different kind of technology accessible now, right? So again, SuccessFactors, Celonis, all that history came through, and now maybe SAP's hopefully can capitalize on this ones.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, any final wrap-up thoughts from folks here on Signavio overall before we end this one?
I think I would love to see Signavio plus design thinking and what it brings to our customers. That's my favorite topic. So
have like an app house flavor to talking about
absolutely.
it all around.
Yeah, I talk about continuous improvement with organizations all the time, and so I'm particularly interested in the ways that it can help support that and underscore the data that helps people illustrate it. So I think it would prove valuable. I'd be interested to see it more in action.
Yeah, and my takeaway is that it is a journey to bring you closer to the best practices and achieving those industry benchmarks. At the same time, also trying to identify those areas where they are not performing the way they should be. And that's where I think, John, the portfolio that we are creating at Mindset can be, even though they're very industry specific, but we can solve one problem at a time. We can help one industry at a time with those capabilities that we are building internally. That's where I see the highest value. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think with that, we can kind of wrap up this lovely edition of the Mindset Nebula. I think for me, this is kind of the most fun we have at Mindset, is being able to talk about these different things. But tune in next time. Of course, we'll have another fun topic. It may be SAP, it may not be SAP. Who knows? And please go out to mindsetconsulting.com. You'll see our event schedule. We have a lot of roundtables, obviously the podcasts, and a ton of blogs and content you see posted on interesting topics like Signavio and BTP and services and everything else under the sun. So yeah, please, thank you so much, Dinesh, Rob, Paru, today for the conversation, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.